Hey, Pretty Girl Club. So, I want to talk about my time following Black women empowerment content creators and kind of how it affected my perception of myself and how it affected my perception of darker skinned, unambiguous Black women over time. So, you guys know that I went to an HBCU. And even though I knew colorism existed, I was not aware of the level of like colorism going on in Hollywood and stuff like that. So sometimes when these content creators would make these videos talking about different rappers being colorist or like different people in Hollywood being colorist, it caused me to click on them because I was like, oh wow, like I didn't know that this was as big of a thing. And so I remember kind of watching these videos and becoming more familiar with it. And over time, I came across this content creator, Chrissy. And she talked about a lot of things that were happening in Hollywood. And she also talked about what it was like for darker skinned, unambiguous Black women. And at first, the thing that I really liked about Chrissy was the fact that she kind of talks about dark psychology. She kind of talks about social strategy and how you can level up and kind of like mindset. And so I became an avid subscriber of her channel. So over time, as I kept watching her channel, she would constantly talk about how bad it is being an unambiguous Black woman. I'm kind of summarizing. She didn't use the word bad, but she was talking about all of the disparaging things that happen towards darker skinned, unambiguous women. And she kept bringing it up so much to the point where I was thinking, wow, like, does it really suck that much for unambiguous, monoracial, dark skinned Black women? And so I remember I started watching other Black women empowerment content creators kind of in the same space or in the same niche as her. And I noticed they were all making similar content. And then I noticed my algorithm started to pop up with these videos talking about, I hate my 4C hair, I hate my dark skin, I hate being Black, those sorts of videos. And so over time, as a lighter skinned multiracial woman, I started becoming insecure even about my Blackness. And I remember one time I was watching one of Chrissy's videos. It was the summertime. I had just got out of the sun. I was like outside all day long. And I remember Chrissy was talking on her video about how a lot of Black men, they don't pick Black women and stuff like that. And she was talking about how basically they felt invisible. And sometimes it wasn't even Chrissy's content herself. It was more so what I would see in her comment section. I used to really enjoy going through the content sections of all of these Black women empowerment content creators. But as I started to see all of these comments of unambiguous women saying things like they feel invisible or they feel like they're at the bottom or that no one wants them, it even started making me feel self-conscious about my Blackness. So even I was starting to think, oh wow, well, if I get darker, am I going to be perceived as uglier? Am I going to be perceived as more invisible? Like, oh my gosh, like maybe I shouldn't try to tan myself. Or maybe I should make sure that I'm always wearing my natural curly hair so that I am perceived differently because they're talking about how bad it is basically if you do not have what I now understand as being a privilege. And I remember it got to the point to where in my mind I started going down this negative thinking pattern where I was like, wow, well, should I be glad to not be a dark-skinned, unambiguous Black woman? Should I be glad that I don't have type 4 hair textures? Because women with these phenotypes are talking about how they are unhappy with having these phenotypes, and they're talking about how much harder it is and how no one can understand them and no one understands their perspective because everyone else has a different phenotype than them. But then I saw Chrissy's social strategy content, so I was like, oh, okay, this is going to be good. This is going to be like, talking about how to overcome colorist people and how to overcome people who are anti-Black. And so I started watching the videos, and I didn't have a problem with the videos at first, but I noticed that as time went on, she kind of was giving the undertones of light-skinned women are your enemy. Like anyone who is lighter than you is your competition. She would even use words like competition or you are competing. And so the way I took it was you're competing for resources, you're competing for a man, you're competing for visibility, you're competing for opportunities. And so I noticed that over time, the more I began to watch these people's content, the more hyper competitive I became. And so I noticed that over time, it was kind of making my mindset a little bit more catty in nature because whenever I would meet other Black women, I would be kind of thinking these thoughts in my mind, like, okay, is she trying to one up me? Or, what are these women competing for? Are these women at my church? At that time, I was like still going to church. I was still religious. I remember I went to a church that was like basically a black church. And I remember thinking, okay, are these women at church? Are they trying to compete with me? Are these women jealous of me? Because that was another thing that a lot of these content creators talked about all the time. And I remember they even went so far as to make talking points like, she's not pretty, she's just light skinned. So, as a light skinned person, I started to think, oh, wait a minute. So, am I ugly? And like basically, I'm only just light skinned, and that's why I got all of these opportunities. So, I only did modeling because of my skin. I only had all of these things because of my skin only. And everything else about me, basically any black features I have, those would be ugly. Or, the fact that I don't have white passing skin and blue eyes and blonde hair, that would be ugly. And so I remember that because she was alienating her light skinned audience, it caused me to start questioning my own beauty. So it almost made me start to accuse my own friends and family members who were not colorist of being colorist, because I started thinking, wait a minute, everyone who's ever complimented me, were they colorist? Like, is my mom a colorist? Is my dad a colorist? Are my grandparents colorist? Are my cousins colorist? Do they only compliment me because of my skin? And also, if my skin tone does not make me pretty, then what is it that makes me pretty? Because these women are saying that basically their black features, so their nose, lips, 4C hair, whatever, they're saying that their black features do not contribute to their beauty in society. And so any black features that I have, whether it's on my face or whether it's just anything about me that looks black or black adjacent, are those things taking away from my beauty? And believe it or not, the more I watched Chrissy's content in particular, I almost felt like she was almost teaching me, as a lighter skinned woman, a superiority complex just based on her own talking points. Because she would talk about how lighter skinned women are preferred, they're put at the top, or like mixed women who have certain hair textures. She was talking about all aspects of colorism, texturism, featureism. And so anytime she would talk about how women with my features were placed on a pedestal, and how it caused women with those features to have like a totally different lifestyle, to have a totally new level of like opportunity and visibility, simply because of these features and their lighter skin tones, it made me start to think, okay, so maybe it's the opposite. Like, maybe society views me as being higher up than unambiguous women, because the way that I had lived my life was I never saw myself as even being the same as unambiguous monoracial dark-skinned black women. I had never really, for lack of better words, I had never really compared myself to them or viewed us as being in the same lane, because I just viewed us as having different phenotypes. So anytime I would see somebody on TV or kind of like, I don't know, look at my self-image or look at my image on another person, it was always a person who looked like me. So someone with a lighter skin tone like me, someone with a similar hair texture as me. I never particularly looked to darker skinned, unambiguous black women as being a part of myself. I saw them as being adjacent to me, but I never saw it as like we are in the same community, competing for the same things, competing for the same visibility. There's a competition for the same man. There's a competition for who's going to get the promotion, for who's going to be perceived as pretty. So I wasn't viewing it like that. I never had kind of this scarcity mindset of, hey, there are only a few good men, or there are only like a few good opportunities, so you better try to claw your way to the top. And I kind of felt like those were the undertones of some of her talking points. But whenever I was watching all of these black women empowerment videos, and I constantly was hearing unambiguous women complain about how horrible it was to be unambiguous, it did start to make those thoughts pop up in my mind. Well, I'm glad I am not going through that, because that sounds horrible. Or, wow, I feel so much pity for these women who look different than me. And, our society is so messed up. And, I wish that there was something I could do to completely erase colorism, texturism, and featureism tomorrow. But since I can't, I almost feel like I have no choice but to just simply pity these women who are going through these things. But at the same time, it's so foreign to me, to the point where I'm like, wow, I wonder how much trauma I would have experienced had I been born differently. And so, what a lot of these women don't realize that they're doing is by constantly portraying themselves as being at the bottom or kind of trauma dumping on the internet, kind of talking about all of the negative aspects of looking like themselves, I feel like it could potentially cause other unambiguous women to have lower self esteem because it's like, if I, as a multiracial person, was watching that and starting to question my blackness, I could only imagine someone who was completely unambiguous watching those channels and then questioning themselves. But I noticed that as the trends became like more popular to bash lighter women, that was when I realized that they viewed us as kind of their number one enemy. And I noticed that they also would throw anyone out of blackness who benefited from an ism, so texturism or featureism. They would throw them out of blackness and make them an enemy as well. So in my mind, I like to think in terms of psychology and sociology. So I thought of it as, a social climbing competition that they were trying to do. And I don't mind social climbing. I don't care if people want to create a pedestal for themselves, put themselves on a pedestal. You should do that. But I noticed that with a lot of these channels, their goal was not to simply put themselves on a pedestal or make themselves equal. For a lot of them, their goal was to put themselves on a pedestal and put down anyone who did not look like them, because that was their way of trying to restore their own dignity and self-esteem. And so, like I said, I don't care if people want to uplift themselves, but the way that you uplift yourself is not by like calling other women ugly and stuff like that, or roasting other women online. And so that was when I realized, wait a minute, these content creators are actually very threatened by mixed race or lighter skinned women or women who have maybe different features than them and stuff like that. So they actually seem very threatened by I guess the beauty or the pedestals that they think that we are on. And by the way, when I use the term pedestal, I'm not even saying that all of us are on a pedestal, because I think that some women, they just don't care about being pedestalized in society. They don't really care about social climbing and stuff like that. But it's almost as if these women by default, they accidentally messed up, because by putting yourself at the bottom, obviously you're putting others ahead of you. And so then I noticed that unambiguous black men jumped on the train with the red pill movement and stuff like that. And they also started talking about themselves as black men, like being at the bottom. And then I started thinking, okay, so we've got unambiguous black women saying they're at the bottom. We've got unambiguous black men saying they're at the bottom and that they're victims and stuff like that. And so they're also accusing anyone who benefits from any isms of being farther than them or higher than them or perceived as prettier than them or has more dating options than them and stuff like that. And so it started to make me curious as to whether or not they felt any jealousy or resentment, because that is a natural response. Like, imagine if you have a sibling and that sibling was kind of the golden child and you were mistreated because you're not the golden child. Well, obviously that's going to cause some natural resentment. It's going to cause jealousy. Jealousy is a normal passing human emotion. Everyone experiences jealousy in their lifetime. Anyone who says that they've never felt jealousy is lying. That is statistically impossible for you to feel every other emotion, but then suddenly when it comes to jealousy or feeling some sort of resentment, you don't feel that. So anyway, I started to dig deeper into this, and I started really analyzing the comment sections of all of the Black women empowerment content creators. And I, for sure, saw tons of comments where women were saying things like, oh, if only I were a few shades lighter, I'd be doing the same thing as Brittany Renner. I would be with NBA players too. Dang it, why couldn't I have been born with a looser hair texture? I would have been an Instagram model too. But then I was like, you know what? That's just a YouTube comment. I'm not going to judge just based on a couple of comments like that. And so then I started looking on Reddit. I looked on Reddit. I looked on Lipstick Alley. I follow the Black women's subreddit. And so I was like, okay, let me see what these women are saying on here. And it was kind of the same story. Some of the women were like, oh, I feel like nobody wants me. A lot of it was very male-centered, especially around Black men. They would say, I feel like no Black men want me or whatever. But I also found it interesting that they stereotyped multiracial Black women as automatically dating Black men. They stereotyped us as wanting unambiguous Black men. But my thing is, if unambiguous Black men are online doing the exact same thing, and even in real life kind of perpetuating this mindset of they're at the bottom, nobody wants them, they were enslaved for 400 years and everybody's going to profile them and basically how much their life sucks, why would I want to attach myself to that anyway? So I found it interesting how these women were assuming that all of us kind of wanted these same black men. And because of that, they were kind of antagonizing us. And so as time went on, that's when I realized that a lot of the colorism, texturism, and featureism movement are very male centered. And also, I started to realize that a lot of the things that these women talk about on YouTube, I started asking women in real life, like dark skinned, unambiguous women. I started asking them, hey, have you felt like colorism held you back? Or have you felt like people were being mean to you and it caused you to like not get as far in life as you wanted to? And a lot of the dark skinned, unambiguous women that I knew in real life, they would say no. Like, no, I don't feel like my skin tone holds me back. I don't feel like my hair texture holds me back. I am happy with my life. I'm living my best life, basically. And so then, as I started this YouTube channel, I used to do live streams, and I sometimes would have, I remember having one unambiguous girl on a live stream so that I could ask her directly, when did you experience like this colorism or kind of like feeling like you were at the bottom? And this girl was unable to answer me. And so I noticed that a lot of what these Black women empowerment content creators talk about on YouTube, they're kind of talking about things on a macro level. So they're talking about the bad systems that are in place. And, you know, I get that. I understand that like people can be racist or they have companies that can be racist and stuff like that. But as far as individual women in everyday life, I noticed that for a lot of them, they couldn't even name examples of when they had experienced colorism, or if they could name examples of colorism, usually the examples were only below the age of 18. So when they were a child. But then when I asked them, do you feel like you're at the bottom of society? A lot of them would say no, like I don't feel like I'm at the bottom of society. So that was when I realized that a lot of the content creators were almost like grifters, almost rage baiting unambiguous women's pain, or almost like rage baiting darker skinned women's pain for clicks and views. And if you look at my channel, it's actually very rare for me to do any sort of content that's triggering, like rage baiting. My compilation videos, my gaslighting compilation videos, I've only done like about one of those per year. But I don't tend to do that many of those videos because I understand psychology. I understand how self-esteem building works. And the way that it works is you don't want to revolve your identity around being at the bottom. You don't want to revolve your identity around being a victim. You don't want to revolve your identity around the negative aspects of yourself or like viewing any part of yourself as negative or as a hindrance. Especially if it's something that you're not planning to change, like your face or, you know, your body type or your hair texture or something like that. But I noticed that the more these Black women empowerment content creators were focusing on me or my phenotype, the more they were focused on my phenotype, the more I started to kind of think, wow, like we must really be a big deal because I see lots of people talking about mixed or lighter skinned celebrities. Lots of people are talking about ambiguous Black women who benefit from featureism and texturism, even though those women identify as monoracially Black. I see thousands of videos where they're just focused on how good our lives are. I mean, I thought that I was a regular person, but apparently, according to other people, we are like damn near celebrities. And so that was when I started to look back on my experiences at an HBCU, and I started to think, well, when I was in college, there was a part of me that was thinking, I wonder if some of these women are jealous, but I had always brushed it off because I was like, no, like I don't see why they would be jealous. But once I saw all of these unambiguous women talking about how they felt like they were at the bottom or like their skin, hair, and all that stuff held them back, and how other women who looked more like me were just living their best lives and minding their business, and how that made them resentful. Well, let's look up the definition of jealousy, because jealousy is actually a form of resentment. Jealousy is an unhappy or angry feeling of wanting to have what someone else has. And so a lot of times when they would talk about the things that we have, it would be things like, I don't know, brand deals, being an influencer, being praised on social media, having a Black man, I guess, or some sort of man, and kind of being perceived as pretty in society. And they were talking about how they wanted that. In fact, all of their strategy videos were focused on how to get a man, how to be perceived as pretty, how to get pretty privilege. And so that would have been no problem had they not centered MLS women as their enemy, because that did actually confirm for me that there was a lot of jealousy. Because like I said, jealousy is just a passing emotion. It just means having resentment. But one thing I noticed is that over in the Black empowerment spaces and the Hotep spaces, they didn't seem to address their own internalized colorism, texturism, and featureism and self-hatred. They seemed to blame everything externally, whether it was white people or mixed race people or Hollywood. And those things are valid. I'm not saying that none of those things can be racist. It is valid, like their talking point. But I noticed that a lot of them, they failed to kind of look within themselves, because a part of going to therapy is actually asking questions to yourself. It's being reflective, and it's saying, okay, what part of these things have I internalized? And one thing I've noticed is that a lot of people in the Black empowerment spaces to this day have internalized colorism, texturism, and featureism. And how do I know that? Well, because they use colorism, texturism, and featureism against mixed race people. So they will say to women like Chili from TLC, you're too dark to be mixed. Or they will say, you look like a regular Black woman, as an insult. They will say things to Doja Cat like, oh, you have no edges, or put on those wigs again, you're going to rip out those edges. And they would talk bad about like her hair texture, or same thing with Blue Ivy. That was Black women with type 4 hair that were talking about Blue Ivy. And so my issue is that a lot of people in the Black community, they are using their own internalized colorism, texturism, and featureism against mixed race Black women. And they use Blackness as a humbling tactic to this day. They will say things like it's bad karma to have a dark-skinned baby if you are light-skinned. Like I've heard them accuse lighter-skinned women of being colorist, and then they'll say, well, I hope she has a dark-skinned baby. That'll humble her. That will shut her up. And it's like, well, wait a minute. Why would you want a dark-skinned woman to be born to a colorist mother? That's number one. And then number two, why are you using her Blackness or her dark skin as something that is humbling? The definition of being humble is seeing yourself as below others. And so I started to notice all of this hypocrisy. And so that's why this channel was created. This channel was created as a response to the flawed talking points that I see over in the colorism spaces or over on those YouTube channels. I've noticed that a lot of them like to, they're starting to change their talking points now, and they're starting to backtrack on their former comments because they see channels like this that are rapidly growing. But I'm still going to talk about it. But anyway, what do you ladies think? What was your experience with watching the colorism YouTube channels about texturism and featureism, and how did it affect your own view of your Black identity? Let me know what you think in the comment section, and I'll talk to you next time. Stay pretty, ladies.